So, a while back, I made a video where I ranked the lowest rated movie from every major animation studio. And man, was that video torture. After that, I got a good bit of requests to rank the highest rated movie from major animation studios, so here it is. And thankfully, I did not nearly die making this one. But I'm pretty sure I'll get killed in the comment section anyway. So I'm pretty much ranking the best of the best when it comes to these films, and something has to be in last place and second to last place and onwards. So if one of your favorite movies from these studios is near the bottom, just be chill about it, okay? And for those of you who are new, I'm basing highest rated off of the aggregate score from critics on Rotten Tomatoes. So I have the same three criterias that I had in my lowest rated ranking video. Criteria 1 is that they have to be animation-specific studios. Criteria 2 is that they have to be theatrical studios. And Criteria 3 is that they have to have a minimum of 5 movies, which leads to a total of 14 studios that I picked out. So I'll be ranking Walt Disney's Pinocchio, Illumination's Despicable Me, Pixar's Toy Story 2, Dreamworks' How to Train Your Dragon, Warner Bros. Animation's Iron Giant, Laika's Kubo and the Two Strings, Warner Animation Group's Lego Movie, Paramount's Transformers 1, Aardman Animation's Wallace and Grommit Vengeance Most Fowl, Studio Ghibli's Tale of Princess Kaguya, Blue Sky's Peanuts Movie, Sony Animation's Into the Spiderverse, Cartoon Saloon's Wolfwalkers, and Don Bluth's The Secret of Nim. Oh, and surprise fourth criteria, there has to be at least 20 reviews for the movie to be considered on the list. I did this solely so that I could get rid of Puff and Rock and the New Friends from Cartoon Saloon, because there is no way that I'm reviewing that movie off of 10 reviews. Call it cheating maybe, but it doesn't feel right to include a movie with that few reviews anyways. So, screw Puff and Rock, and let's get into this ranking.
I had strings, but now I'm free.
From the studio that brought us Beauty and the Beast, The Lion King, Wreck-It Ralph, Zootopia, and their top-rated movie is Pinocchio. Oh, dang, get that one out of here. Not that one. Is Pinocchio. In my humble opinion, Pinocchio might be one of Disney's most overrated movies. But again, we're talking about the highest rated movies here, so that doesn't mean it's a bad movie. But similar to Snow White, I feel like this movie is carried more by its historical significance than its actual story and enjoyability. To start with the positives, Pinocchio does bring the iconic story of the wooden boy and his lying nose to the big screen. Pinocchio himself is also a pretty likable protagonist. He's just pretty charming and innocent, while also struggling to navigate the darker secrets of the world that he doesn't fully understand yet. The movie also gave Disney their iconic theme music based off of When You Wish Upon a Star. And notice I mainly just specified the theme music, not the song itself. Yeah, I don't really care much for the song, to be honest. Unfortunately, the movie can also be pretty off-putting, mostly unfunny, and sometimes just a little boring. Some of Pinocchio's No Strings on Me can be, weird to say the least. And it's kind of disappointing that Jiminy Cricket didn't have as many memorable moments as I would have expected. And another big problem with this movie is that, similar to Dumbo, Pinocchio wastes the signature feature of its lead character. In Dumbo, he doesn't utilize his actual flying ears until like the last 10 minutes of the movie. And in Pinocchio, his nose rarely grows at all. Most of it is just contained in one scene where he's confronted by the wishing woman, and he pretty much just tells a series of lies, and after that, nothing else ever happens to his nose ever again in the movie. But the absolute gravest sin that Pinocchio commits is that it copies way too much off of Pistachio from VeggieTales. The real ones know. Pinocchio is not a bad movie. It's a decent one. But given the amount of versions of Pinocchio, I would definitely take Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio over this one.
What's my problem? First of all, I'm a rat.
The Secret of Nim. well, it's better than a troll from Central
Stop
Park.
it.
The best thing about this movie was easily the main character, Mrs. Brisby. She is such a gentle soul, while at the same time being undeniably brave and heroic, and it was really nice to see that. She gradually just gains greater confidence and courage throughout the movie out of her love for her children, as well as some desire to help out the rats as well. It's nice to see a character that can be feminine and motherly, but still show a strong sense of heroism and courage. Okay, so kind of in a mindless scraping for extra vocabulary words, I did interchange bravery and courage even though they're not the same thing. Bravery is more of a spontaneous reaction to push against danger, while courage involves more of a conscious choice to push against danger despite the fear that one might be feeling. In that case, I'd say that Mrs. Brisby was more of a courageous character. So Mrs. Brisby was a great character, but when it comes to the crow, Jeremy Crow, well, at least his name wasn't Jim. Man, Jeremy Crow was annoying to me. He just felt like an unfunny burden to basically everyone in the movie. He did have his moments here and there, but for the most part, he was just a pain. And learning about the rats and whatever happened to them at the NIMH laboratory, it's handled well enough, but it certainly is pretty dark in how it's portrayed. And it is a little confusing to me, like what exactly happened to some of the rats. Why do some of them, like the owl, have glowing eyes and act like these mystic creatures, while the other rats just seem like highly intelligent rodents? It's a little strange, and I guess it adds to some of the ambiguity and mysteriousness of the whole laboratory experiments, which is why it works well enough, but I don't know if it was entirely satisfying. In general, this is a pretty dark yet ambitious film that I just don't think reaches the heights of the movies that I have higher on this list. And that's kind of the difficult thing about ranking the highest rated movies. It's that I'm just gonna be more biased towards movies that I've watched much longer throughout my life. And Secret of Nim wasn't one of those movies. Although it would have probably been nightmare fuel if I watched it as a kid. But overall, this is a decent movie. So for the first third of watching Kubo and the Two Strings, I thought that this may very well be in the top 10 for this list. And clearly, it's not. Again, when we're talking about the highest rated movies from each studio, I'm not saying that Kubo is a bad movie. For the first third of the movie, I was really tracking along with how good the stop motion animation was. The action was exciting and engaging. It had a great mystery box on what was happening with Kubo's mother and these two creepy sisters. And I liked the humor between Kubo and his mother when she was initially turned into a monkey.
You have questions, I can tell.
Who?
You get 3.
Why only 3?
Okay, that was your first question.
His mother functioned great as a comedic straight man. Straight woman? Straight monkey? But as this movie went on and started to reveal answers, it just didn't really work for me. It was somewhat predictable yet confusing when it was revealed that the beetle creature was actually Kubo's father. Even though Hanzo was transformed into a beetle, he still had a human face. So it was kind of weird to me when Kubo's mother somehow couldn't recognize him until the end of the movie. I mean, I guess maybe his face transformed into a non-recognizable human face, but I don't know, it just didn't hit as well as I think they intended. And speaking of Beetle, his death was just kind of stupid. The two sisters are basically supernatural, and Beetle thinks that he can just hit her one time and then completely turn his back on her and put down his weapons, and nothing's gonna happen? And then going further into the actual final confrontation between Kubo and his grandfather, it plays out a lot like the final fight from Wonder Woman. Starts out with a conversation, villain turns into crazy looking monster, then gets defeated by a monologue.
They're everything you say, but so much more.
Without it, I can't look into the eyes of another and see their soul.
Everything you love is gone.
And you will never take
Not
that
about
away.
deserve.
It makes
It's
us
not what you believe.
ever be. These are the memories of those
And I
we
believe
have
in you.
loved and lost. And if we hold their story,
although this movie did definitely handle it better than Wonder Woman. But overall, I'd say Kubo and the Two Strings has some standout moments and excellent animation, but on the whole, it's just not as good as many of the movies on this list. Well, looks like it's time to make some people mad. Wolfwalkers is an interesting movie. The animation is so creatively unique, especially with the way that the wolves run as a group, as well as the way that Meb's hair is designed and the way that it moves around. And I also really liked the friendship between the two girls. Their friendship grew so organically, and it was fun to watch them exploring the forest together, sharing food, and talking about their different lives. And the additional conflict of Robin needing to choose between her friendship with Meb and her love for her father who hunted the wolves. It spiced up an otherwise typical template of colonials vs the natives. And I'd say now is a good time to get into why this movie might be a little lower than some of you are expecting. In a lot of ways, this movie does just follow the typical plot beats of the natives vs colonial storyline. The colonial character meets the native, they think the native's going to attack them, but the native ends up helping them. The native shows the colonial that nature has magic powers or something. The colonials launch a big attack on the native environment, leading to a split up between the colonial and native friendship. Then the colonial makes it up to the native, and then big final fight against the colonials, typically in the native environment. This movie essentially follows that format, except adds an Irish folklore skin on it. And I'm not really someone that's really big into that kind of trope, but that's not the biggest issue in the movie for me. My biggest issue with this movie comes down to the thematic implications of how Lord Protector's ideology is directly contrasted with the Wolfwalkers. Lord Protector is portrayed as a corrupt, ruthless religious tyrant, and there's numerous religious references from him as well as the town that he governs throughout the movie. There's lines like, "Work is prayer," or "It is God's will that the wolves must die." Stuff like that. Now, I'm not saying it's a problem to depict corrupt Christian leaders. They very much do exist in the world, and the director himself already said that his intent is not to attack Christianity, but rather to base Lord Protector off of a real political tyrant from early English era. My issue is that they have this negative depiction of a corrupt Christian side by side with the ideology of the Wolfwalkers, which is heavily based in pagan, naturalistic, Irish folklore stuff, and it's portrayed as this fun-loving, free-spirited, happy, fun place, contrasted directly with the boring, dry, oppressive religious regime of Lord Protector. And by portraying the magic forest as the positive contrast, it almost inherently brings an undertone of this mysticism style of living being the more desirable and positive way of life as opposed to a more Christian perspective. And I'm not really on board with that. Again, even though the intent of the movie may have not been to explicitly say Christianity bad, the inherent thematic undertones of what they chose to contrast side by side without really much of a positive representation of Christianity, it's just a frustrating aspect of the movie that makes me a lot more conflicted on it. Especially when it's a movie intended to appeal to impressionable children. So while could y'all step back, please?
Oh!
Wow. Where was I? Oh, right. So, while Wolfwalkers has many positive elements, the core theme of the movie really held it back for me. The Tale of Princess Kaguya might be the slowest paced movie on this list, but it still makes for a pretty rewarding experience. The movie has a pretty unique starting point, with Kaguya being born inside of a bamboo tree, and being discovered by a man working in the fields. And so he decides to take her home, where he and his wife can raise and nurture her. Wait, is that a nipple? But I really loved the way that Kaguya had to deal with everyone trying to make her decisions for her, and the way that she handled the four princes who clearly didn't care as much about her as a person, and were more interested in how her otherworldly reputation could boost their personal status. Did I say 4? I meant 5.
What are you?
An idiot sandwich.
But all of the princes in the movie express their fascination with her by comparing her to a beautiful, rare object. So Kaguya calls their bluff by demanding that they go and bring her the rare objects that they compare her to if they want her hand in marriage. And I thought that was a pretty clever way to call them out on what they were really after. The songs in this movie are also quite solid, and I was pretty surprised on how this movie ended on a pretty ambiguous and downer note. Kaguya gets so fed up with living on Earth that she requests to her parents to take her back to her home world, and ultimately, once her parents arrive, she regrets her decision, but by that point, it was too late, and her parents force her to come back home. After having her memories from Earth wiped by her parents, she takes one final look at the Earth before the movie ends, and it's not clear if maybe she had a spark of memory of the life she used to have, or whether she was just looking back out of curiosity, but that's how the movie ends. But her parents are just left on the ground, heartbroken at her departure and questioning whether they could have done things differently, and we're left to ponder and dissect the thematic implications of the story. I will say that I'm not as super gung-ho as many people are about the animation with this movie. There are some spectacular shots, but in general, it can sometimes just look like an unfinished coloring book. It's not like it's horrible animation overall, but it's nothing special, at least to me. This movie can definitely be too slow for my liking sometimes, as well as a bit confusing, but overall it's still a well-made film.
Fung.
When it comes to the world of Hollywood, there's a general rule that you can rely on. When Brad Bird is directing a movie, you know it's gonna be good. When Brad Bird is directing an animated movie, you know it's gonna be good. This is a heartwarming boy and his dog style story, except if the dog was a 50-foot tall alien killer droid. Their friendship is really nice. The animation evokes that late 90s blend of traditional animation and 3D animation, and it works spectacularly well, especially on the giant. And the ending is definitely an emotional gut punch.
You are who you choose to be.
I will say that this movie sometimes feels tonally uneven. The movie is set during the Cold War and can feature quite a handful of political language, as well as a couple of minor curse words for the time period that feel uneven. But other than that, it's a shame that this movie bombed because it's a darn great film. Wait, why did you bleep me? I just said darn. Will you stop bleeping me? I did not curse. Oh my gosh. It's on the lower side of the list simply because it didn't resonate with me as deeply as the movies higher, but this is still very much a winner from Brad Bird. I'm often quite baffled by how often Aardman animation movies get such intensely high praise from Rotten Tomatoes. But in the case of Wallace & Gromit Vengeance Most Fowl, I was surprised by how much I really liked this movie. I hadn't seen a Wallace & Gromit movie prior to this, but watching this one, I have to say that it was quite a charming adventure. Oh, excuse me, let me say it right. It was quite a charming adventure. Alright, I'm never doing that again. First off, I loved the penguin villain. He felt like such a goofy villain, but at the same time, so diabolical and interesting. I liked how because his clay design didn't come with an actual mouth to his speak, he doesn't say any words, nor does he really have much range with his facial expressions. He communicates only through his direct actions as well as pointing with his flipper hands. And he's able to accomplish quite a bit with manipulating Wallace's Norbot drones. And speaking of the Norbot drones, I liked how they served a timely thematic message about the potential dangers of advancing AI. It's a pretty common theme for movies to touch on nowadays, but I still liked how this movie took on addressing it through these gnome robots. I do have to say though, for all of Wallace's geniusness, he could be pretty airheaded sometimes with his oblivion to the gnome's behavior. Gromit had to be the one to continuously notice the issues that Wallace could not, even some of the more obvious ones. I also really enjoyed the dynamic between the old officer that was nearing retirement and the young woman officer. There were multiple funny moments between them, and I just like how the older officer was just kind of burnt out and not willing to use as much energy to think outside the box, while the younger officer, she was just so spunky, so energetic, so eager, and always coming up with all these new ideas. And it made for a very entertaining pairing. It all culminated into an epic chase sequence and a climax at a bridge where Gromit nearly dies. I think there were a couple moments in this movie that went on longer than they probably needed to. Like, there's an instance near the beginning of the movie that shows Wallace going through a whole Rube Goldberg style machine to get out of bed, and it probably could have been cut down a little bit. And maybe it's a little bit of a plot hole as to why Wallace would design the robots with the ability to have an evil feature. But nonetheless, I very much enjoyed this movie.
These nuts. Got him!
The Peanuts movie is truly a masterclass of what you can do with such simplicity. Of course, Charlie Brown is quite an iconic character, but in general, the Peanuts franchise is predominantly known for its comics as well as its TV specials. So more shorter forms of entertainment and media, but turning it into a full-fledged movie is definitely a harder task, especially in the modern day with CGI animation, as well as the studio that took on the task, which definitely was not known for making high-class animation, but they pulled it off. They managed to create a fantastic animation style that seemed to blend 3D with 2D animation, which allowed for a CGI movie that still stayed true to the animation style of the Peanuts franchise. This movie has numerous funny moments throughout, with the classic Charlie Brown making a fool of himself. And beyond that, there's just so much relatability within Charlie Brown's journey throughout this movie. Just his struggles with overthinking his every step and feeling like the whole world is against him sometimes, all leading to a beautiful finale where he finally confronts the red-haired girl whose face was obscured for the entire movie. And she pretty much recounts to him all these little moments throughout the movie that would otherwise just look like typical moments of Charlie Brown making a fool of himself, but looking deeper into it, especially from a new girl's perspective, she can see how those moments demonstrated his integrity, his humility, his courage, and his helpfulness. And all these little details that just make for such a powerful and heartwarming theme. There are so many instances where we may just feel like failures or feel like we're not accounting to as much as we should be in the world, and we don't realize just all these little ways that our actions are making a positive impact on other people's lives, and all these positive traits that people can see in you that you may not even see in yourself. It's not the biggest, most epic climax, but it absolutely nails the incredible charm that the Peanuts franchise is so good at. I will say that I found the intercuts of Snoopy's doghouse story to be kind of distracting and not necessarily the better parts of the story. I get why they included it. They're pretty iconic and well-known parts from the Charlie Brown franchise, but watching Snoopy mimic a pilot was just not as interesting as the overarching Charlie Brown story with the redhead girl. So that was a slight negative with the movie, but I absolutely love this film, and it is definitely one of Blue Sky's best films. So of all the 14 movies on this list, Transformers 1 was the most recent movie that I had to watch. And I am truly an absolute foreigner to the Transformers franchise. I kid you not. Up until the point of watching this movie, I always thought that Optimus Prime was the main villain of the Transformers franchise, and Bumblebee was the main hero. Yeah, that's how dumb I was.
What are you?
But having figured out now that Optimus Prime is the main hero and Megatron is the main villain, I thought this movie did a nice job of displaying the two when they were initially friends, and the unfortunate circumstances that led to them becoming arch rivals. Similar to the tale of Princess Kaguya, this is a rare animated movie that's actually a tragedy. It depicts the rise and fall of a great friendship, all through the means of incredible action, tense conversations, corrupt politicians, and ultimately betrayal. The scope and size of the Cybertronian world is truly a sight to behold. And this movie might have the best action sequences of any movie on this list. Better than How to Train Your Dragon, better than Kubo and the Two Strings, and arguably even better than Into the Spiderverse. Just the added layer of all these incredible transformations that the Cybertronians have to do, the epic upgrades that they acquire throughout the movie to make the battles that much more visceral, fast-paced, and intense. I was entertained all the way throughout. Now, I will say that while Chris Hemsworth did do a good job as Orion Pax, there were times where his voice felt like it was inconsistent and cutting in and out between sounding like his usual voice and sounding more like a cyborgian voice. And there is a slight part of me that thinks that maybe Megatron's turn to evil may have been done a little too quickly, but it was definitely compelling enough to make for a great story and overall a satisfying character arc. In a lot of ways, this was the perfect movie to introduce me to the Transformers franchise, as it is supposed to be the prequel that started it all. And I have to say, for how good this movie was, it makes me want to watch the rest of the Transformers franchise now. But maybe I shouldn't. There's a reason why the How to Train Your Dragon movie got a remake. It's because this movie's score, its size, its grandeur, all of it translates phenomenally well to a live-action format. Now, I haven't seen it yet, so I can't comment on whether it was good or not. And there's also a very real discussion that could be had over whether or not it could be for the worse to have a remake to the How to Train Your Dragon movies, because it could mean that Dreamworks could go down the same path as Disney. But anyways, back to the animated movie, this is fantastic. I love the creativity that was utilized to craft each and every dragon in this movie. Some dragons have multiple heads, some dragons are very tiny. It's sort of like the monster world from Monsters Inc., where there's just so many unique designs to observe and enjoy. And they really did a fantastic job on crafting the main antagonist dragon at the end of the movie. It is truly a cinematic marvel to see this gigantic winged beast taking on Hiccup's village and the dragons. And I liked the minor theme of thriving in the midst of disability. When Hiccup first meets Toothless, he realizes that he had damaged Toothless's tail and ruined his ability to fly properly. So, Hiccup created a prosthetic tail fin to help Toothless fly. And then by the end of the movie, after Hiccup commits his heroic act to defeat the dragon, he loses part of his leg, and therefore he needed a prosthetic leg to walk. But despite both Hiccup and Toothless each having some form of prosthetic, they ultimately became the heroes of the village and powerful leaders. And I thought that was such a fantastic way to execute this underdog story. And beyond Hiccup's relation with Toothless, his relation to his father was also very well executed and had solid payoff. But yeah, I really don't have too many negatives with this movie. except that the humor and comedic reliefs suck. Yeah, that's really my big gripe with the movie, is that they do attempt a good bit of humor with Hiccup's friends, and I don't think I laughed even once at anything that they did. Most of it was just kind of annoying. So this played better as just a more serious movie, as the humor really didn't work for me at all. Personally, I wouldn't have How to Train Your Dragon as my favorite DreamWorks movie, but I can absolutely understand how it's the highest rated movie on Rotten Tomatoes, as it is a true cinematic achievement. I've talked about Despicable Me before, but I do think that this movie is criminally underrated. Because of just how oversaturated the Minions have been in pop culture, a lot of people seem to forget how good the first Despicable Me was, and they don't give it the respect that I think it deserves. This movie did a fantastic job at making a supervillain turn into a good guy. Megamind did the same thing and is often hailed today as an underrated masterpiece, but Despicable Me did it first. This movie just did a great job at creating what feels like a Saturday morning cartoon turned into a compelling feature-length film. Vector is a fantastically entertaining villain that actually teaches kids two important science lessons. He teaches them what a vector is.
It's a mathematical term, a quantity represented by an arrow with both direction and magnitude.
And stealing the moon has fatal consequences. The vector we saw in Despicable Me 4, that was cheap fan service, and for all I care, that was probably his twin brother or something. But as far as I'm concerned, Vector died on the moon. But the general supervillain underworld was very well crafted. The humor is on point, the emotional payoff is satisfying, the opening song is very catchy, the action is handled well, and there's a ton of creative and unique gadgets throughout the movie. This is one of those movies that I grew up watching, and it still holds up very well to this day. For a movie with such a silly premise about stealing the moon, Despicable Me utilized a ton of creativity and heart to create, in my opinion, one of the best animated films of all time.
It's fun.
I remember when this movie was all the hype when I was a young kid in school, but it took me a long time before I actually watched it for myself. And this movie had no right to be as good as it was. I love all of the meta humor throughout this movie, and just how self-aware it was on playing off the Chosen One trope. Emmett is deliberately depicted as the ultimate everyman. He is a complete slave to routine, and perhaps the most generic type of Lego that someone could have. But it perfectly fits into the movie's themes about how someone doesn't have to come from like a prestigious family line, or be the richest, the biggest, the strongest, whatever, in order to do incredible things. Emmett exists in a movie alongside powerful superheroes, professional athletes, and intergalactic legends, but yet Emmett is ultimately the one that successfully stops Lord Business from supergluing the city. Which leads into the final twist of the movie, which for me is what elevated it from a great movie to an all-time great movie. The final twist of the movie reveals a real-world scenario where Lord Business was being represented by a human dad, and Emmett was being represented by a child. And as many parents get kind of sick of Legos and how messy they can get, many parents do desire to superglue them together, which is what Lord Business was aiming to do. And ultimately, the way that the resolution of the movie works out, where the kid is ultimately able to connect closer with his dad and help his father see the creative potential in Legos, and how the whole point of Legos is that they're not supposed to be all stuck in one piece. It creates for such a satisfying and heartwarming ending where the father can just have closer bonding time with his son, and it's one of the best executed instances where a villain changes his mind based off of a monologue. I didn't even touch on how great the voice acting was throughout, as well as how great of a character Wildstyle was with her mysterious persona. There are just so many great things about this movie because it really utilized its property to the best of its ability, allowing for a fast-paced, high-energy movie featuring tons of great characters, different IPs, and multiple different settings and environments. This movie has inspired numerous crappy knockoffs, but none were even close to emulating its success and greatness. I probably heard the Everything is Awesome song too many times as a kid to where it sometimes just grates my ears when I hear it now, but that would probably be my biggest negative with this movie. The Lego Movie did an incredible job of using a great story to market how Legos can really unlock one's imagination. Deciding whether to place Into the Spiderverse or the Lego Movie in the number 2 spot was the most difficult decision that I had to make on this list. I already knew what was going to be number 1 and what was going to be in last place. I did struggle with what would be the number 2 spot. And clearly, Into the Spiderverse won. What is there to be said that hasn't been said? For me, this has by far the best soundtrack of any movie on this list. Prowler's theme is absolutely phenomenal, and the song when Miles takes his leap of faith is literally a moment that can give chills. Similar to the Lego Movie, Spider-Verse is a self-aware satire, but instead of poking fun at the Chosen One trope, it pokes fun at the Spider-Man origin story. And it did a darn good job at it, as Miles Morales has become a household name for Marvel superheroes. And of course the animation is revolutionary. Puss in Boots, the Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem, numerous movies have emulated the style of this film because it is absolutely fantastically creative. And I really enjoyed the mentoring relationship between Peter B. Parker and Miles Morales. It's a well done dynamic where each of them are teaching each other the same lesson in different ways, where Peter B. Parker is trying to get Miles Morales to take a leap of faith and stop overthinking his ability to use his powers. And at the same time, Miles has to teach Peter that lesson when he's afraid to restart his life again after things didn't work out with him and Mary Jane. And I really loved how they did that. Now, I was always disappointed with this movie for how much less the other 3 Spider people are utilized in the story, being Spider-Man Noir, Spider-Ham, and the girl with the robot suit. I feel like everyone always forgets her name. But for the time that they were there, they still each had their own unique characteristics that made them very enjoyable to watch. I also think it's kind of strange how they designed Kingpin and the Green Goblin, where they both seem like these hulking monsters, and even Kingpin can lift a car with no issues. That was kind of strange, but Kingpin still made for a good villain at least. I'm really hoping that Beyond the Spider-Verse can land this trilogy well, because if it does, then this is without question the best animated trilogy of all time. I only grew to appreciate this movie more after Across the Spider-Verse came out, which I do admit I like more, but nonetheless, Into the Spider-Verse is a cinematic marvel. Ha, get it? Before Toy Story 4, I would often see Toy Story 2 listed as the weakest Toy Story movie. I vehemently disagree. Toy Story 2 is not only the best Toy Story movie, but it is one of the best Pixar movies and just one of the best overall animated movies of all time. I've talked about this in a YouTube short as well as another video, so I won't go too much into it now, but simply put, I really loved how Toy Story 2 utilized Woody and Buzz. By having Woody grapple with how he's going to respond to Andy growing older, it created a perfect situation to introduce Jessie as not only a fantastic fun-loving character, but also a tragic representation of Woody's fears of abandonment, as well as creating a perfect opportunity for a twist villain where Stinky Pete can initially come off as a genuine character wanting to convince Woody of a better life before his true colors are shown at the end of the film. And Buzz is fantastically utilized as he is now clearly aware of his state as a toy, which creates some perfect funny moments between him and the Buzz at the toy store, and it sets him up to be a fantastic, confident leader of the other toys in their rescue mission for Woody. I mean, I only have like 2 small critiques of this movie, being that the logic of a toy horse keeping up with a commercial jet is certainly quite silly, And the scene where Buzz and the toys tried crossing the road felt a little bit too silly to me as well. But none of that takes away from the absolute gem of a movie that Toy Story 2 really is. Thank you for watching. Be sure to check out my ranking of the lowest rated movies if you haven't already, and give this video a like and subscribe, and be sure to share it as well. Hopefully my next big studio ranking like this will be talking about the highest grossing movie from every major animation studio, so be on the lookout for that in the coming months. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.